Well, I look down and I see this elderly man talking to my fiance. And I'm looking down and I'm going, okay, excuse me, but who the hell is this? Sitting kind of close, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? So I finished doing what I got to do, climbed down the ladder, walked over, and my fiance Lotus said, babe, this is Elmore Leonard.
Today we are thrilled to welcome Danny Cosmo. Cosmo is a world record-holding high diver who shared his experiences with Elmore, which Elmore used while creating the character of Dennis in TISHOMINGO BLUES. After retiring from high diving, Cosmo worked as a stuntman in over 170 movies, and we had such a great time hearing from him about meeting Elmore, helping train actors for what would have been the movie version of TISHOMINGO BLUES that was not meant to be, and more. Cosmo, welcome to the Elmore Leonard podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it, Judd. Really appreciate you having me on. I look forward to this conversation.
Oh, likewise. We've been able to speak with a handful of people who've been referred to in some of Elmore's books, but nobody who was risking their life on a daily basis. I mean, I guess there are some marshals and some cops who are doing that, but I think even they would be afraid to do what you've been doing. So you've not only been a high diver, a stunt diver, but you're also a stunt man, a stunt coordinator. I want to get into all that, but before we do, this is the Elmore Leonard podcast. How did you first meet Elmore? Tell us about that.
Well, that's a interesting story. A company I used to work for, Maxwell Associates, it's a high diving company. I worked for them for maybe about 10 years, and then I went off on my own, and I had my own show, my own diving tank, and all that, and didn't work for them anymore. And I got a phone call, and they said, "Look, Cosmo, we want you to come to Panama City Beach and set up this ladder because our guys are having trouble setting it up." And I said, "Okay, well, I want this much money." And they said, "Oh no, we can't pay you." And I was like, "Okay, well then, never mind. I have other things to do, and it's okay." So a week goes by, and they call me again, and they say, "Look, we really need you." And I said, "Well, you know my rate." And they said, "Okay, we'll pay you." So me and my future wife, my fiance, drove up to Panama City, and we went to Miracle Strip Park. That was May of 2000, Memorial Day.
Okay.
And I started setting up the tower. And the ladder that they were using was a flat ladder, which is just a straight, regular ladder. And it's very hard to set up. I learned on that ladder early in my career. So I was very advanced at doing that. So I started setting up the ladder, and I was at the top, and we put a crown on it. It's a little piece that you put on top of the ladder, and you put a flag on top of it.
Okay.
Well, I look down, and I see this elderly man talking to my fiance, sitting on a bench. And I'm looking down and I'm going, okay, excuse me, but who the hell is this? Sitting kind of close, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? So I finished doing what I got to do, climbed down the ladder, walked over, and my fiance Lotus said, babe, this is Elmore Leonard. He's a writer. And I went, oh, okay, whatever. I said, hey, nice to meet you. And he proceeded to tell me that he's doing research on a high diver and high diving, and he's just interested in learning some things about the sport and about everything that goes on. And that's how I met him, and we started talking, and the rest is history.
That's great. So did he did he say how he happened to be there that day? He was just driving by and he saw a big ladder and pulled over, or he knew these guys were trying to build something, and so he was aware of it, or like how did he end up there? Do you know?
Yes. His researcher called. Dutch asked his researcher, find me a high diver that dives from 80 feet in the air." So his researcher did some researching and stuff, and found Maxwell Associates. The one of the owners, son, Dean Maxwell, he invited them to Miracle Strip Park so they could get an idea of what the setup looks like and what a high dive show is about. And
Yeah.
that's how they came to be there at Miracle Strip Park, as the company I used to work for
Right.
invited them. And it was an act of faith, Judd. It was an act of faith because I told them no. I
Yeah.
mean, this company kind of did me wrong, and I worked for them for a long time, and I just felt, used. So I went on my own, and something told me to do it. It wasn't a lot of money, but something to, after the second time I told them no, something just said, clicked and said, just go do it. And I'm happy I did, because I met a really, really good friend that is really good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I want to obviously hear more about some of the time you spent with Elmore, and all that. And of course, high diving is featured very heavily in Tishomingo Blues, which is one of the classic novels of Elmore's,
Yeah, one of
and
his favorites.
it's just terrific. And we will be doing a deep dive on the podcast before too long, but we had the chance to speak with Cosmo, so we took it. What is it like? I mean, this is what you were doing. How long were you a high diver, and how did you get into that? Because I can understand how someone gets to be a teacher or a police officer or an accountant, but I don't. You're the first high diver I've ever spoken to. So, how did you even get into that in the first place?
Well, I've been a diver all my life, springboard diver, platform diver. My dad threw me off the diving board when I was 2 and told my mom I would sink or swim. And I swam to the side, and I started diving ever since. Most people do football, baseball, soccer, all that. I was on a diving board 8 to 10 hours a day since I was, 4. I started competing when I was 4. And
Okay.
so I worked up to AAU and high school. And in 1984, I was at the World's Fair here in New Orleans and watching a show called the Aquacade. And it had synchronized swimmers, and it had
Okay.
high diving and regular diving. And I was sitting in the audience, and some of my friends that I dove with when I was a kid, they worked for that company, Maxwell Associates. And it's like, dude, do you wanna do this show? And I'm thinking, wow, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to do this. Now let me fast forward. Let me backtrack a little bit, because you know I wasn't quite good enough to make the Olympics. I grew up with
Okay.
Greg Louganis
Oh wow.
and another diver called Bruce Kimball, rest in peace. But they only took like 2 or 3 divers for the Olympics, and I was one of the top divers in the state of Louisiana. I would say I was in the top 3.
All right.
And once I got to that age, my dad said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a stuntman. And he goes, okay. But I wasn't good enough to be in the Olympics. I just didn't have that, talent. I mean, I had the talent, but I guess I didn't have the coaching.
Hmm.
And so I went, I decided to go pro. And in 1984, they asked me to join the Aquacade in New Orleans. And I started diving from the diving boards and the platform. And it was 2 weeks. I went from 30 feet to 96 feet
Oh my
in
gosh.
2 weeks.
That's insane. Real quick, was your dad a diver? Was he, he just threw you off the pool one day?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean,
He
like,
wasn't a diver. He couldn't dive. He could barely swim. But one thing about him was, whatever I wanted to do, he was there.
yeah. Well, I mean, so the fact that he threw a 2-year-old into the pool when he couldn't swim is he must have had a lot of faith in you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He would have went to jail today. But that was 1964, so they had lifeguards at the pool, but I dog paddled back over, and and I went straight back up to the diving board. I have video footage, Super 8 video footage of me trying to do a dive off the low board, the 1 meter diving board, when I was 2. And it's pretty good. Guinness used that for another conversation later. But
All
yeah,
right. Well,
they
we'll
ended
we'll
up
get
using
there.
that footage.
So you're at 30 feet, which is, and that's
About
the
10
high
meters.
dive.
Yeah,
That's the high dive. In the in the Olympics, there's like that's the high dive, the high
yeah.
platform.
33 feet is the 10-meter platform. That's the highest that they go in the Olympics right now. They're trying to get high diving into the Olympics,
All
which
right.
it's
If they
about
do,
40
will
years too
you?
late.
Well, I don't know. I mean, why not get in there? You look like you're in pretty good shape. You could probably do
Yeah,
it.
well, you can see me from here up.
How do you go from 33 feet though to 96? Are they telling you like? Tell me about that. Like, how does
Yeah,
it work?
well,
Like, you
that was the
start.
interesting part. Later on, they have a movable perch. It's a platform that you can stand on that you can move up. Well, at the World's Fair, it was such a big tower. They used a like a crane tower, and the perch wasn't the platform that you dive off of wasn't able to move. So you had a
Okay.
30-foot one, and then the next one was 96 feet. So a couple people that I grew up with, they were teaching me. They were like, okay, well, when you get up to 96 feet, you can't throw it as hard or as strong as you do from 30 feet, because you got 60 more feet to travel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I understand. But in order to make the dive that I was doing, which was a complete one gainer, it's a reverse somersault, I had to throw it pretty hard. Plus, I had to jump out because the diving boards were right underneath, the platform.
Oh my
And
god.
so I was jumping out and jumping out. And finally, they said, okay, you're ready. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't do it in practice. I put my name on a list and I said, I'm going to do the last show of the day. And we did 6 shows a day. And they all looked at me like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, I'm ready. I'm ready. And so it came. I was nervous. I had this little red sequence jacket on because, it was like a glitzy show. Esther Williams produced the show.
Oh wow.
And so I climbed up to the first platform, 30 foot, did my little wave to the crowd, and then made my way up. I went up the ladder so fast that the announcer that was announcing, he didn't know what to do because I was up there so fast. But I
Oh
wanted to
wow.
be up there so I could kind of get my head straight, like, this is something that I've never done before. I've done it from 30 feet, maybe 20, 30, 40 times, but this is a whole different ball of wax. I looked down, and the pool looked like a $50. I was
Yeah.
like, gee, I'm like, I can jump out of this thing. If I don't, if I'm not right, I could land on the front row. I land on my brother that he's filming me, And so I took a little time, and well, I threw it like I was throwing it off of the 30-foot platform.
Okay.
So I did one complete somersault and had 70 feet to go. When you're supposed to jump it up, get it stuck a little bit, and then like fly through the air, spot the water, do your tuck, and land on your feet. Well, I had one complete somersault and I had 70 feet to go. So my instincts took over. That's when I was called a cat because my instincts took over, and I'd always had air since I've been little. And so my arms waved. I made my arms go in a circle motion. I threw out my legs like I was doing a split,
Hmm.
and that slowed me down. And I ended up in the water perfectly. And
Oh
all the
wow.
veterans high divers, after it was over, all the veterans high divers said, "We thought we were going to have to bring you to the hospital.
Oh my god.
We thought you were going to land on your back. We thought you were going to die on your very first high dive, and we were going to be blamed for letting you go up that high." And
So
I put it in because I had my air sense, and that's something that saved me, and
yeah.
that was a very big lesson learned.
So you didn't want to practice. You just sort of felt like I'm ready. I know I'm going to do this, and I'll just do it in front of a whole crowd for the first time. Like, what?
Yeah, Judd, my philosophy was if I'm gonna whack myself, I'm gonna whack it in front of a live audience, and not in practice, because if I whack myself in practice, I can't do it for a live audience.
That's fair. I often subscribe to the same philosophy.
Yeah.
You talk about air sense. So is that are you thinking about your body and the positioning, or are you just doing it?
Well, okay, let me go back a little bit. Diving, it's a lot of like springboard diving and 10-meter diving in the Olympics. It's all about sight. You spot, like people are doing somersaults and they spot the diving board. They spot it once, they spot it twice, and then they kick out to go in head first, or into the dive. When they're doing, it's called spotting. So you spot the water, you spot the board, you spot the platform. Well, I was never a spotter. I felt it. I just knew where I was in the air, and so I counted. So if I was doing three somersaults, I would count one, two, three, and then I would see the water and be able to kick out or whatever. But I could never see the diving board. I could never see the platform. I always counted. And that's what people would say, well, that's why you're not ever going to be a great diver, because diving is all about spotting your entry, spotting the diving board, spotting the platform, so you know where you are. Well, I knew where I was no matter
Yeah.
what.
Well, it seems like it. If especially if you made it on your first try, that's pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
Now, let's go to the second high dive. The second high dive, it was raining a little bit, and I was up at 96 feet. Now, 96 feet is incredible for your very first high dive. All right,
Yeah.
this you don't do that. I never had other high divers go from 30 feet all the way up to the top.
And they people weren't worried. There wasn't someone who was worried about,
Oh yeah, they were
free.
all worried, but
Okay.
I had the charisma and the just I talked them into it. I was like, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm doing this, and whether you like it or not. So let's fast forward to the second high dive. It's raining a little bit, sprinkling, and I'm going, okay, Cosmo, don't jump. Well, we'll get into that later. Uh, okay, Danny, don't jump as hard as I did last time.
All right.
So I'm like, okay, I got to jump a little bit softer and feel that little area where you go, oh, I'm in trouble. And then you see the water and everything's fine. Well, my foot slipped off the platform a little bit. I
Oh.
didn't get the jump I wanted to,
Mm.
and I'm falling at 50 miles an hour, and I can't turn over. I haven't made that initial jump to get me to come over to do the somersault.
Yeah.
So now, within 3 seconds, I go, okay, I can't land on my back because I'm going to break my back and possibly die. What can I do? I grabbed my knees underneath my knee where it bends, and I just yanked as hard as I could to get over. I figured if I landed on my face,
Oh.
I could survive better than if I landed on my back. So I ended up going into a like a fetal position, where my feet and my head and my face landed in the water at the same time. Not quite a belly flop, but almost.
And that
And
didn't kill you.
no, I got out the water. I had to do a dance afterwards, because you did a dance because that's the end of the show, and all the little girls, the synchronized swimmers, come on the stage and they dancing, and the high diver has to do a dance, and I did the dance and everything, and then I got off stage and I collapsed in my one of my best friend's arms. They freaked out. They were like, "Oh my God, he's got internal injuries. He's gonna die." And they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm embarrassed.
Mm.
I messed up in front of 5,000 people. I'm sorry. I apologize." And they were like, "What, are you kidding me? You're okay?" They had a hospital on the grounds.
Yeah.
They brought me to the hospital. They did X-rays. The doctors were just baffled. You landed how? From how high? I said I landed like this from 96 feet. And they were like, "There's nothing wrong with you.
Hmm.
I mean, your body's a little red.
Other than the fact that you chose to dive off a 96-foot platform,
Right, right,
there's
yeah,
nothing
yeah.
wrong.
Other than what's going on in your skull, but yeah. So they sent me back as a precaution. They didn't let me dive for three more shows, and then they let me finish the night, and I did the final 2 shows. And the next day, I got up there and did the high dive, and it was perfect.
So how long does it take? I had a over the weekend. I climbed up on my roof, and in your honor, I climbed up on my roof and I took down an old satellite dish that we, hadn't we don't use, we don't need,
Right.
and uh, and it wasn't my favorite weekend ever, but it also wasn't 96 feet. Like, did you ever get used to being up that high and where it's not, or is it all every time? Are you just a little bit nervous because it's
No, every time I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to tell you, a long, long time ago, when I first got into the business, an older man, he's passed away now, he told me, he said, Danny, if you ever lose the fear of high diving, it's time to get out the business.
hmm,
He says, because you have to have some fear, because that keeps you in check.
yeah,
That keeps you knowing that, okay, yeah, I've done this dive a hundred times. No big deal. And you can't do that. And I've took it for granted, and I've whacked myself and hurt my back pretty bad, which kind of forced me out the high diving business totally, not totally, but performing every
hmm,
day.
yeah,
And I took it, I took it for granted, and I hit the water and I loosened up. And you have to stay tight when you hit. We go feet first all the time, head first. It's just your arms and your neck is not as strong as your legs. That's why most high divers you see go in feet first. Other than a few, and like the cliffs of Acapulco, they do the head first dive because they drink tequila and they jump off and they don't care.
right,
But most of your high divers go feet first because your arms and neck and shoulders are a lot weaker than your legs. And I took it for granted, and I landed in the water, and I loosened up, and it twisted me so bad that it knocked me out under the water.
oh
And I
wow,
came up out of the water and thinking, oh, my back is killing me. But I was always taught, no matter what, if you can get out the water, salute the audience, and make your way to the back. And then, and I had no idea what my injury was. Adrenaline was still going. I saw my life flash before me under the water for about 5 or 8 seconds. I mean, from the time I was little now. And so, yeah, get back to your point is I've always taken it serious and never ever lost the fear, because once you lose the fear, then you're going to get whacked, and 20 or 30 feet can kill you.
yeah.
I mean, and here I am diving from 80 to 100 feet. And yeah, so I've always got that little fear. And what I did was I channeled that fear into a positive energy, and I allowed that fear to work in my favor instead of working against me.
So you see this older gentleman hitting on your girlfriend. You climb down. You find out what's going on, and you find out he's a writer. He's doing research. Had you heard of him? Had you read any of his books?
I've never heard of him. Didn't know who he was. Later on, I found out that yeah, he was quite the ladies' man. But but yeah, I've never heard of him, until I got home and did some research and found out, wow, this guy's wrote books that turned into stuff that I've watched on television, like Last Stand in the Saber River. Me and my dad watched that on television, and I remember that, and yeah. So, but when we first met, no, I didn't have a clue. I'm the type of person that if you ask me what I do for a living, you better have time, because I'm gonna talk your ear off, because I love what I did.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed entertaining people. And anytime somebody asked me about what I do, then I was all for it. But about Elmore, about Dutch, was he got into it. He wanted to know everything. I mean, it wasn't like, how's it feel? Yeah, of course he asked the question, how you feel when you're up there. But I mean,
Mhm.
he got into some serious questions that I kind of like tripped out a little bit. Let me step off for a minute and get a bottle of water.
Sure, sure, sure.
I got a scratchy throat.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time.
All right. Ah, should have had some water there. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, he asked questions that a lot of people never asked. I mean, we
Yeah.
had groupies and all to ask, "Oh, how's it feel when you hit the water and all?" And he asked those typical questions, but he wanted to know what went on in my mind.
Yeah.
As I'm climbing the ladder, what am I thinking about? And stuff like that, and which I found was interesting. And so we talked a lot at Miracle Strip Park. He went into all kinds of questions, and I remember one of the questions. Well, one of the statements he said was, "I'm writing this book, and I have a chapter that's about a high diver. I asked my researcher to find me a high diver. Here I am." They talked to the other high divers that were there, maybe 5 or 6 guys, but they decided that they wanted me to talk. I mean, me and Dutch hit it right off. I mean, well, of course he was hitting on my future wife, so
Sure.
of course
There you
we
go.
hit it off. I go, well, he's got good taste, you know. So, but yeah, he was somebody that wanted to be in my head to know exactly what's going on and here and there, and I had no clue what he was doing.
Right.
I just knew he wanted to know about my profession, and he was very interested. He focused me, looked me in the eyes. I mean, and he was a cool dude.
Yeah.
Of all the things, he was just cooler than I could ever be.
He was pretty cool.
The king
And
cool. Yeah.
was it strange? I mean, just you meet this guy and all of a sudden he's asking you some, like very deep, very personal questions. Like was that weird, or was it just like you felt like you knew him and you could share that stuff? Because
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was the thing. Yeah, I did feel it was a little weird, but we hit it off so well. And I don't know how long he was talking to my future wife down there, but
hmm
my wife loved him from the minute, I mean, and she was a big Stephen King fan. So
okay,
she read a bunch of Stephen King books. So they talked about that a little bit too and all. And so my wife was so open with him, it made me go, okay, my wife's a good judge of character. Of course,
yeah,
she's with me. So
uh-huh,
that was a plug. But anyway, so yeah, I found it a little weird, but I also found it very intriguing because he wanted to ask, he wanted to get deep inside. And I talked to him for 10 minutes,
yeah,
and it was like we knew each other.
for years.
Yeah, we knew. Yeah, exactly. We knew each other for years.
For those of you who haven't read Tishomingo Blues, go read it.
Yes.
Dennis is the main high diving character. There's 3 or 4 main characters, but it all
Yeah.
starts with Dennis, and he's certainly in the book for much more than one chapter.
No, no, exactly. What I was told was he loved everything that I would talk to him, because after we left Miracle Strip Park, I didn't think nothing of it. I went home and started my everyday life, and then I get a call from his researcher, Greg, and
Sure,
he
Greg
goes,
Sutter.
"Oh, Dutch wants to talk to you." And I go, "Who's Dutch?" Because I only knew him as Elmore, Mr. Leonard. And he's like, "Oh no, that's Dutch's nickname and all that." And I was like, "Okay." He goes, "Can he call you?" And I was like, "Yeah." So he called me and we talked for hour and a half,
Yeah,
and then he called me again, and I mean, we became to where if I thought of something, I call him. If
yeah,
not, he called me, and so yeah, the friendship was there, and he said, it was going to be one chapter, but you gave me so much interesting info that I'm going to have him throughout the whole book.
yeah,
And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, I had no clue that he was, it was going to be loosely based on my life. I mean, I realized he was a fiction writer,
sure,
so, that was cool. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, every time we saw him once the book came out, every time we saw him, he would introduce me as Dennis. This is
yeah.
Dennis. This is the high
Wow.
diver. I mean, and,
Yeah,
and it overwhelmed me, but it also made me feel really good, because,
I
he
bet.
thought that highly of me to consider me that.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you gave him so much great information, and one of the things that he would talk about a little bit was that the characters he wasn't writing, the characters were talking, And having spoken to you just a little bit and knowing how well you talk, maybe it was you just he wanted to use you because you made it easier. And I love the book, and you brought and so you
Yeah.
made it better. So I think we're all grateful for that. But you got to be friendly with him, and you would travel to see him, and you spent some time with him after. Well, first off, the book comes out, you read it. I assume you like it, but tell me, what do you think of the book?
Yeah. Well, can I let me backtrack just a little bit.
Sure.
Um, I ended up breaking a world's record. Uh,
Congratulations.
belly flopping from 29 feet into 12 inches of water. Okay, I know you're looking. Most people say, "Oh, 12 feet of water. That's not no big deal." No, it was 1 foot of water.
That's a big
And
deal.
Dennis called me up one day, and they said this was right after I met Dutch, and they said, "Look, we're looking for somebody to break this record, and everybody we've talked to pointed to you, said Cosmo is the guy." And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, well, so anyway, fast forward, I ended up breaking the record. I ended up on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Okay.
They called me and they said, we want you to do an exhibition. Well, both of them called. David Letterman, Jay Leno called and said, we want you on our show. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, whoever gets the best offer wins. I
Sure.
like them both. I think David Letterman would be interesting. I could be like on Stupid Human Tricks. And then, Leno, I wasn't that big of a fan. I was more of a fan of Johnny. But anyway, so Leno came back with the best offer and the first offer. And so I went.
Yeah.
When we were there, we decided that we were going to make a T-shirt. Now the book's not even out. We are going to make a T-shirt that said "TISHOMINGO BLUES" on it.
Okay.
And they said, we'll wear it. So I did rehearsals with somebody other than Jay, the AD or whatever. Did rehearsals, and I wore a different shirt. We did the rehearsals. Come to taping, Jay comes out and everything. Well, I'm standing there, and the AD goes, "Is that the shirt you had on for rehearsal?" And I went, "Yeah, I think so." And it was the Tishomingo Blues shirt. So I
Yeah.
walk out. I introduce myself. They call me by my real name, and instead of Cosmo, and I'll get
Okay.
back to that later. But
All right.
I didn't say anything about the book. Nothing. I just
Yeah.
had it on my chest. I went up to do the 20-foot dive. The camera zoomed in on me. It's a white T-shirt with red lettering that said Tishomingo Blues on it,
Oh
and
wow.
I did the belly flop. I got up, got a standing ovation. Jay was just beside himself and all. And once Dutch saw it, he thought that was the greatest thing in the world because the book's not even out yet. And
Yeah.
here Dennis, Danny is advertising for him, and nobody knew it was like a subliminal message that we put into people's minds that people going, what's Tishomingo Blues,
Right.
So,
Well, thank God they didn't change the title of the book after you did that, because
yes.
uh, that's awesome. Well, he must have gotten a kick out of that.
Oh yeah, he loved it. He just thought that was the greatest thing. In fact, I still have the shirt. It don't fit me now, but I carried it. I carried it on because of what of our relationship with me and Dutch. It was just it was amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I read the book. Getting back to your question, and I thought it was great. I mean, I he got points that were perfect. Some of my high diving friends said, "Wow, we read it, and that's right. That's our life."
Yeah.
That's our life as a high diver. I mean, now I've never saw anybody get whacked while I was on the high dive, but I've almost been whacked. I mean, I've been shot at in Puerto Rico
Really?
while I was on top of the ladder. Yeah, they wanted to shoot the gringo. I mean, I don't know why. I guess
Who
and
was trying to shoot you?
some a drive by. We were at Roberto Clemente Stadium in doing the Puerto Rico State Fair, and I was up 75 feet, and we had a drive by, pow, 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 and I'm looking around, and I see them flash, and they're pointing it at me, and
Oh
I
my God.
immediately jumped off. I can't even tell you what dive I did. I just know I landed in the water safe because I just know how to do that, and that spooked me so bad. I didn't do the rest of the shows that night. I went to the owners and said, "Look, I just somebody tried to kill me." Oh
Yeah.
no, no, no! It's just a drive by. Well, it's a drive by. But yeah, and then when I saw that, he wrote that, Floyd gets shot rigging the ladder, I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's not exactly what happened, but I can relate because, I was up on top of the ladder when there was shots fired, and I never
Yeah.
told him that. I never told him any of that. Nope.
Oh,
Never told him about Puerto Rico. And like I tell people, I said, he was in my head before I even knew he was in my head.
yeah. Yeah.
And he was coming up with things going, well, I would think that, and I would go, yeah, that happened.
Right.
Driving around in an old pickup truck and breaking down. You know how many times that happened to me? Going, oh, am I going to get to my show? And that brings me back to that company that I worked for when I met him, Maxwell
Mm.
Associates. I went on my own, and I was doing high dives for little fairs and festivals. I contacted casinos, so that part of it was really true. He basically kind of took that and ran with it. And I read it and I was like, wow, okay, put a quarter down, look
Right.
at it from standing up. That's what the pool looks like. That's a direct quote from me
Yeah.
because that's one of the things he said. Well, what's it look like up there? I can't explain it. This is how I can explain it. I put a quarter down. Now look at it. That's what I see.
Yeah.
And, I guess he loved it, and I was just trying to get him to visualize what I see.
Sure.
I have top cams and cameras on the top of the water looking down, and it really don't do justice to where, when you're actually looking down at it. And
Hmm.
we once we got training in the movie, we'll get into that later. But once we started training, I put cameras up so I could send him the footage and let him actually really see what it looks like.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So it wasn't too long after the book comes out that people start talking about turning into a movie, and Don Cheadle was perhaps going to star in it, but also he was going to direct it as the
Directed,
story.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know why that movie didn't come together, but it was far enough along where you were actually you were starting to train some actors. Who were you training?
I was training. Well, to jump back just a little bit, I get a phone call from Dutch, and he goes, "Hey, who would be better to play you, Matthew or Mark Wahlberg?" And I went, "Oh, well, that's interesting. First of all, why are you calling me for this?" And he goes, "Well, because you're the diver." And I go, "Yeah, but I'm a peon, I'm happy." And he's like, "No, I want your advice." And 1994, I got into the movie business, and I doubled Leonardo DiCaprio diving off a cliff into the Hudson River for a movie called Basketball Diaries,
Okay.
which was Jim Carroll's story, a famous rock musician and poet. And Mark Wahlberg was in that,
Okay.
and I met Mark in that, and he was really buff. He had muscles and all, and so I was like, well, and Matthew had just got made the headlines for playing bongos in a nude,
All
and the
right.
police came and knocked on his door and all that, and so I told Dutch, I said, well, I really believe Matthew would be a better diver because he's got a diver's body, and he played the bongos in a nude, and he's one of those kind of guys, and that's what high divers are kind of about. We're not really serious athletes. We're guys that meet the girls and go out to the bars for drinks and get up and do the same thing the next day. And so that was fine. He goes, okay, I think we're gonna go with Matthew. And maybe that was a week later or whatever. And maybe a week later after that, I go, well, I'm gonna call, out of respect, I'm gonna call Matthew stunt double,
Okay.
and to introduce myself because I'm green in the movie business, Judd. I've only had maybe about 3 or 4 credits. I wasn't that big in the movie business, so Dutch was wanting me to be a part of this movie, be the trainer, the technical advisor.
Yeah.
Uh,
Makes
he
sense.
told me I could double Matthew, and I was like, okay, well, whatever. And so I called the stunt double, Mark Norby, who was Matthew's friend, childhood friend, and was his stunt double. And I
All right.
introduced myself to him. He said, okay, let me get back with you. 2 days later, he calls back and he goes, okay, yeah, I'm gonna send Matthew your way. And I went, oh, you had to call about me? And he goes, well, yeah, I did. And he goes, and everybody that I talked to said, you're the guy. You're the guy that can train Matthew to be safe. You're unbelievable high diver. And that was unbelievable to hear
Sure.
a seasoned veteran stuntman that was Matthew's stunt double say that, yeah, he checked me out and I'm okay. So
Right.
I get a call from an 818 number and I answer it and he goes, Cosmo? I go, yeah. He goes, Matthew McConaughey. Well, as soon as he opened his mouth, I knew who it was,
Sure.
and I laughed because he told me both of his names, Matthew McConaughey. Every time he called me, Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, I know who you are.
Yeah.
But he goes, I'm supposed to come and see you. And I was like, yeah. So I set up my tank, which is 7.5 feet deep.
Yeah.
The tank that Dutch watched me dive into was 10 foot deep.
Okay.
I bought a smaller tank because I was going out on my own and I needed something to try to grab shows.
All right.
And I'm the only man in the world diving from 80 feet into 7.5 foot of water.
Oh wow.
So that grabbed it. So I set up my tank in 70 foot of ladder. I couldn't go 80 because I live by an airport and I'd have to put a light on it. So I put 70 feet. So I get a knock on the door, and it's Matthew and his bodyguard driver, John.
All
And
right.
he's like, hey, so we walk him in my backyard, and he looks at it. John looks around. He sees that we're okay. There's not paparazzi. There's
Sure.
not 100 of my friends wanting to meet Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
And I was very cool about that. I was like, I didn't tell anybody
Right.
because I didn't want anybody to mention it. And then I have a bunch of news people or whatever and making Matthew uncomfortable. I wanted to show Matthew what it was all about. So he saw the pool.
Real quick,
Go ahead.
you're living in New Orleans at the time, or wherever you live.
Yeah. I live right outside of New Orleans in
Okay.
Metairie, Louisiana, which is, a suburb. And my father-in-law owned a fourplex, which now is ours. He gave it to my wife, and I set it up in the back of the fourplex. And he was freaked out because he's like, "Where is this?" And I go, "It's in your backyard. I hope you don't mind." And he goes, "No." And he didn't understand. He's a Chinese man. He didn't really understand what I did for a living. And so I set it up. Matthew comes over, sees it, and he goes, "Well, why don't we jump into this?" And I went, "Oh, you want to train?" He goes, "Well, first I'd like to see you do a couple dives." So
Yeah.
I climbed up. Of course, we wear Speedos. So I climbed up in my Speedo and did a couple dives. And he's like, "Okay, well, I'm ready." And I go, "Well, no, you're not. You're not ready for the top." And he goes, "Oh no." And so I took him. Of course, I thought, he's from Texas. He's a cool guy. Most probably the second coolest. Dutch being the first coolest. I thought
All right.
Matthew was the coolest. I never met him or anything. His bodyguard was so comfortable that we have a bar that serves lunch like 50 yards from my place. His bodyguard was so comfortable with me and my wife, knowing that there's not a bunch of people, no
Yeah.
paparazzi. He left. He goes, "I'm going to grab a bite to eat." And that kind of made me feel better because it wasn't, he trusted me. It wasn't like, okay, and once again, I'm very new in the business. So, I don't have a lot of credits and all. I said, let's start from the base. I had a little platform that met the pool,
Yeah.
so the pool was here and my platform was here and then the ladder went up. And I
Okay.
said, let's jump. I said, I want you to jump in because it's 7.5 foot of pool of water. I want you to know where the bottom is.
Yeah.
The bottom comes real quick. So he jumped in and he goes, "Oh yeah, I hit the bottom." And I go, "Okay. So now I'm going to teach you what we call a scoop. It's where as soon as you hit the water, you put your legs into an L position
Hmm.
and it shoots you across the pool instead of using the depth of the pool where
Yeah.
you're going to use the width of the pool, which was 22 feet in diameter." So
Oh.
he learned how to do that, and he was okay. So we brought him up the ladder a little bit further and a little bit further. He got maybe about 6 feet, 7 feet, and then he called it a day.
All
And
right.
he's like, "Okay, well, we'll see you tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay." Well, one of my wife's relatives was a big Tulane booster. He graduated from Tulane. He was a big booster, and I called in a favor, and they were going to close the natatorium where they dive, the
Oh
diving
wow.
boards, the 1 meter and the 3 meter. They were going to close it completely so I could train Matthew there because I didn't have a diving board,
Yeah.
on my tank, and I really thought he knew how to dive. He's like, "Nope, never dove in my life." And I'm like, "Come on, man, you're from Texas. I mean, nope, nope." And I'm like, "Gee whiz, okay, now I gotta go from the beginning.
Yeah.
I gotta start from like when I teach my 10-year-old kids when I was a diving coach. that's how I have to start. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So I arranged Tulane University in New Orleans to close their whole natatorium. I mean,
Wow.
that was a big favor,
Sure.
which my wife's family, was pretty well connected. So I got that done and had it closed and ready to do it. And he calls me on the phone and he goes, "Listen, I'm sorry, I talk like him just because he's such a funny, cool guy. Listen, I'm in Zachary, Louisiana, which is about an hour away from me." And he says, "I was wondering, I'm with my girlfriend, and I was wondering if maybe we could train here."
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Well, as long as I can find a diving board. I
Yeah.
need a diving board to be able to teach you first, what to do." He goes, "Oh, yeah, I'll have my guy, John, find some places." So they found some places, and one place was one of those backyard diving boards that's like a rock, no
Yeah.
bounce or nothing. And they had a boxer dog that was in the backyard. And every time Matthew would try to jump off, the boxer dog would jump in the water. And Matthew was a dog animal lover, so he didn't mind. I was getting frustrated a little bit, like, can we control the dog?
Yeah.
But so we went through that, and then finally they said, "Oh, we found a 3 meter diving board," and we went to train with that. But yeah, that was my introduction to Matthew, and which I thought was really cool. We trained for about almost 2.5 weeks, and
Oh
then
wow.
we both got the same phone call at the exact same time from two different people to let us know that the film was gone over. It was not going to happen. And from
Oh.
what I understand, one of the producers didn't think the Civil War reenactment would sell overseas, and that's just what I heard. I don't know how true it was. Dutch had a few things to say, and he wasn't too really happy with the script. John C. Richards, who wrote Nurse Betty,
Okay.
he penned the script. I still have it, one of the scripts that they sent me, and
Yeah.
Dutch wasn't really too happy with it. He was okay with it, but he wasn't really happy with it. And of course I asked him, why don't you write the
Sure.
script? And he goes, "Cosmo, I did that a couple times, and no, I don't want to work for anybody."
Yeah.
And when you write and you work for somebody, and so he didn't want to do that, and I kind of understood a little bit, and but yeah, and then of course Don Cheadle, he was picked to play Robert Taylor, which at first I thought was unbelievable choice, and then he was going to direct it, first time directing, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is going to be interesting." Well, then I get a phone call from one of the producers, Stephen Lim. He was the line producer at the time, and I think a lady called Rebecca Yeldman, I think that was her name. She called me up and said, "Look, Don Cheadle wants to come to your house," and I went, "What? Excuse me?" "Yeah, he wants to come to your house and watch you high dive." And I went, "Oh, okay." So they arranged it. I get a knock on the door. There's Don Cheadle at my door,
Okay.
and I'm thinking, wow, this is surreal. First of all, I met Matthew, and then now Don Cheadle's at my house. So I offered him to come in. He took off his boots. He was wearing boots. He took
Yeah.
off his boots,
Yeah.
and he came in my house. And I said, "Have a seat on my love seat." He goes, "No, thank you." He sat on the floor. And of course, me and my wife found that very, very not disturbing. I don't want to say disturbing, but it was just like, okay. I mean, hey, if he's comfortable sitting on my floor, he's comfortable sitting on my floor.
Yeah.
He goes, "I want to watch some video." And I had hours and hours of video of me high diving from all over the world. So we sat for most probably about an hour watching my shows and stuff. And then he says, "Okay, let's go out and watch you do it live."
Hmm.
So we went out in the backyard, which was perfect. My ladder was set up. I went out there, did some dives. My wife had my video camera, and I told her, I said, whatever you do not video Mr. Cheadle. I mean, I don't want to lose this job.
You're right. Sure.
I don't know if he's going to be wanting to be on camera. I don't even want to ask him if he wants
Yeah.
to be on camera. I mean, let's just be cool about this. So one of my stunt coordinators that were here that I worked with, he was the stunt coordinator on Boogie Nights.
Okay.
So he came over and made kind of Don feel a little bit more comfortable, here, and which was cool. I enjoyed that. I mean, they got to catch up, and Don kind of knew that I knew people, and I wasn't just a fly by night dude. And so my wife videoed me high diving, but I still have the video, and you could hear I did a 1.5 twisting double, which is a full twisting 1.5 with a branny on the end, which makes it a double. It's a flip with a half twist, and that was my bread and butter. I mean, if I was hungover or from being at the bar when I was younger or whatever, I could do that dive in my sleep 100 million times.
Wow.
So that's the dive I chose to do, and it's an action dive. It's twisting and flipping, and it's really cool. And you could hear him on the video going, "Oh wow, oh that was a rip, that was a rip entry. Wow, that was awesome." And I have that video. I
Oh my
watch
gosh.
it every now and then to bring back the memories that Don was at my house.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that was one of the stories of training. Until it got shut down.
Yeah, yeah. Quick question. Are you always, maybe not now, but in those days, were you all, you said that you dove, when you dove, you wore a Speedo. So were you always wearing a Speedo in case somebody showed up and said, let me see you dive? Or like,
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, instead of underwear, I always had a Speedo underneath my shorts or my whatever. No, no. I just I knew ahead of time that they were coming. And the news people came out because people called the police, when I was training, for Matthew or for, well, like I said, I put a camera up at the top. Before Matthew or Cheadle came to my house, I put cameras. I had my wife, well, fiance and all video, so I could send it to Dutch. So Dutch, you have the video, put it on DVD, and sent it to him. But I had a camera up at the top of the ladder, looking down, so he could see what it looked like and stuff. But somebody called the police and said that somebody's committing suicide.
oh, jeez.
And so we were outside. I was training. The couple people came over to watch, like my family members. They just wanted to see me live in person doing it. And a police officer was behind the fence behind me. We live in a fourplex, so there's like a fourplex here. Then right next to me, there's a fourplex. Behind me, there's a fourplex. So we're very close. So the policeman was on the other street, walked over to the fence and kind of looked over the fence and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I go, "Oh, hey, how you doing? What's happening?" And he goes, "Well, somebody called and said somebody was committing suicide, and I needed to come over and see it." And I was like,
Repeatedly, over and
"Okay, yeah."
over, they
Well,
were
that's what I
committing.
said. I went, "Well, what did they think?" Oh, he didn't kill himself, so he's climbing up the ladder again. Uh, he's not very good at killing himself because this is the fourth time he's doing it. But you couldn't see the pool; you could
Right.
only see the ladder sticking up and some guy flying off. I have high-rise buildings, well, not high-rise, but 20-story buildings that are on one of the main thoroughfares
Sure.
by the Lake Pontchartrain, and the people were looking out of the windows there. In fact, one of them drove by and said, "We couldn't see what you were going into, but we had to we had to know, And I was like, "Oh," so I invited him in the back, climbed up, did a dive for him, and they were like, "Oh, okay." Never told him what it was about. Told him I was a professional high diver and just training to do my thing. That was what got me separated in the 1994 World High Diving Championships. Was I put my pool and my ladder up in my mom's backyard at the time. I was living at my mom's house, and I trained during the wintertime
Hmm.
for the World Championships in Silver Springs, Florida, 1994. So I trained for like 6 months, and I ended up shocking the world by coming in third and winning the bronze medal in the 1994 World High Diving Championships in Silver Springs,
Congratulations.
Florida. And everybody didn't know who I was. I was diving against some of the best divers in the world from all over the place, Russia, everywhere. And out of like 60 of the best high divers, I finished third.
That's
And in
amazing.
the preliminaries, I finished third, and Cynthia Potter and Jim Neighbor and John Neighbors, Jim Neighbors, one of them, they came up to me and they said, "Oh, we'd like to interview you. We didn't know who you were. We had all the college divers, and one guy was from Eastern Michigan University. His dad was a diving coach. He was like a 5-time national champion. Another guy from Arizona, my very good friends and stuff. They were just divers. I
Yeah.
was self-taught diver,
Right.
and so they
Did you
said,
wear a Speedo during the winter? What did you wear?
oh no, I wore a wetsuit, and
Okay.
well, winters in New Orleans. December 25th, it could be snowing. Last year it snowed for us, but it could be 80 degrees,
Got it.
in December. So it really wasn't that bad. I wore a wetsuit at times, but, I wore because wetsuits are buoyant. And so when you hit the water, it kind of blocks your entry some. So I just grinned and bared it and,
There you go.
just, did it. But yeah, I trained. And so Cynthia Potter's like, we'd like to interview you. And I go, oh, well, you didn't want to interview me before the competition, but now
Yeah.
you want to interview me? And they were like, oh. And I went, I'm just kidding. I'll do whatever interview you want. But
Sure.
yeah, I was kind of like hurt. I'm like, you're interviewing all these people, but you're not interviewing me. I'm going to win this thing.
Right.
And had one of the two divers, two of my best friends that I worked with all over the world, if they would have missed one dive, I would have won the whole thing.
Oh,
But
wow.
they didn't. And that's the way it is, a little bit off and I would have won. But, I didn't. I took the bronze medal, which was the highlight of my life because they were taking pictures to send to a stunt coordinator. And that's how I got Basketball Diaries because I
Oh my
looked
God.
just like Leonardo DiCaprio at the time. He was
Right.
like 18 and I was like maybe 31 and something happened. He grew up and I stayed the same. And I could never double him after that.
Sure.
He got to be 6'2" and I stayed the 5'7.5".
Right. That's wild. So, and was that your first movie that you
Yes,
did?
that was my first movie ever. I tried to get in the movie business here. There was 1 or 2 films going on. Went and saw the stunt coordinator, but the movie business is about who you know and not how good you are or anything like that. And that goes back to, when I wanted to be a stuntman. But anyway, yeah, that was my first movie. They flew me to New York
Cool.
and they brought me to this cliff. It was in the Hudson River. It was behind Columbia University. They had
All
a
right.
big C painted on the cliff for Columbia University. And the stunt coordinator was an older guy, said, this is what you want to dive from. You got to dive from this cliff into the water. And I went, okay, well, that looks a lot higher than what you told me because they wanted me to go head first.
Yeah.
And I said, the highest I'll go head first is 60 feet. That's
Right.
just high. I won't go any higher. And he goes, oh, no, it's 60 foot. Well, being the professional and the person that I am, I brought a rope.
Yeah.
And I went up to the top of the cliff, dropped my rope down and went, no, I think you got about 20 more feet. It's more like
Yeah.
80 feet. And he goes, oh. I'm like, my very first movie, I don't want to start any trouble,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure they understand that
But you want to
I'm
be able to
not
do a
going,
second movie.
yeah, and I'm not going 80 feet head first into a moving Hudson River, the most polluted river in the world. There could be a log 2 feet underneath the water. I mean, I live right there on the Mississippi, and it's no different, so I understand. And I was always taught if you can't see the bottom of the water and where the bottom is, go feet first.
Yeah.
Because if you hit something, you can break your ankle, but you're not going to break your neck. So I told him, I said, look, I'm not doing it. And they're like, oh. And I said, you want me to go 80 feet into the Hudson River head first? You're going to have to pay me way more than what you're offering me. And then
Yeah.
at the time, the SAG daily was like 400 and something dollars a day. And then you get a stunt adjustment or whatever. And I was like, no, it's going to have to be, 10 times that amount.
Good for
And they
you.
were like, oh, well, no, we can't, the Basketball Diaries was a low budget movie, really. And considering all the stars that they had in that movie, it was not a very big budget. And so I was like, okay, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I can go feet first. I can do a branny, which is a flip with a half twist to my feet, or I can do a fly in front. And they picked one of my other friends that were in the high diving championship to double another actor. So we were both there at the same time, and we were good friends. We decided that we are going to do Brannies, which is a flip with a half twist off of it, and then yeah, that I made the New York State Police frog team go under the water a couple minutes or an hour before I was going to dive, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Well, we already went in to check the bottom of check the water," and I go, "Yeah, but it's a moving river."
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, I mean, logically, you'd have a big net to where I'm going. And it was funny because there was two X's at the bottom of the cliff, and I asked the stunt coordinator. I said, "Is that where y'all want me to land? By that X?" And the AD, I didn't know who the AD was or what an AD was, but he shouted out, "Oh no, they found two dead bodies there not too long ago." It was like, okay, so now you're definitely going in because if I hit the water and then there's a dead body underneath there, I'm gonna freak out. So they went in the water, very cold. It was in April, very cold. I had to do the dive in boxers in
Yeah.
underwear, and so I made him do it. And I just remember, Mark Wahlberg coming up to me going, you're amazing. I didn't really talk to Matthew. I mean, to Leonardo very much, but Mark was so interested in what I did, and I had
Yeah.
just finished. I had just finished winning the bronze medal, so I had a newspaper article of the newspaper came and went up all the way to the top of my ladder and used a fisheye lens to take a picture of me doing a back flip, and you could see like where the world it looked like you could see where the world bended and all, and I
Oh.
brought that with me and I showed it to Mark, and he was so intrigued by that he's like, "Oh, this is so cool, this is so cool." And another really quick story about him was he was the only person that was allowed to drive on the set. Nobody could get on the set. You'd have to take the bus, and all. I didn't know back then, but he was the only person. Well, he had a Jeep Cherokee, and one day he pulled up and he had the music on, and I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And he goes, "Come here, come here." So he sat me in the passenger seat. He goes, "Look," and behind it, where the seat was in a Jeep Cherokee, it was all taken out, and it was nothing but speakers
Yeah.
under plastic. And I was freaked out because I never really seen anything like that before. And then he started his music, and it was so loud, Judd. It was so loud. I was just like, "Oh my God!" And he goes, "How's that sound?" And he was Marky Mark at the time, and I didn't know who he was. And he says, "That sounds good, huh?" And I go, "Well, yeah, it's kind of loud." And he goes, "Oh, that's only on two." And so I was like, "Oh wow!" So I get out the car, I walk over, and the first AD looks at me and goes, "Who are you? Why are you so special?" And I said, I'm nervous. First movie. I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to get fired on my first movie." I go, "I don't know, understand what you're talking about." And he goes, "Nobody's been in that Jeep. Nobody on this set. We've been shooting for 6 or 8 weeks. Nobody's been on that. You come in and you're right in the thing, and sitting in it." And I went, "Oh well, I didn't know who he was." I mean, he goes, "Well, maybe you know my brother and the new kids on the block." And I went, "Well, maybe my niece knows." I'm a rock and roller and stuff. And I've never talked to him about that. I've worked on a couple shows that he's been on, but never ran into him again. And I've always wanted to know if he remembers that.
Yeah, sure.
Matthew, I see Matthew on shows, and he, True Detective. I walk on True Detective, and he looks at Woody and goes, "He's the diver. He's the diver. He's the one that was training me." And then Woody's like, "Oh," and we became friends. I took him out fishing on my boat because I was doing water safety on True Detective, and they got in my boat with the director. And all of a sudden, it comes on the radio. Anybody know where my cast and my director is? And I'm doing water safety. I'm not the stunt coordinator. I know the stunt coordinator because it's Matthew's double. And I get on the radio and I go, yeah, this is Cosmo. They're out in my boat fishing." "Oh, okay, Cosmo. Just tell them we're about 20 out." And I was like, "Okay." I had him fishing on my boat because Matthew remembered me. Failure to launch. He introduced me to Bradley Cooper. "Hey, Bradley, come over here. This is the diver. This is the diver." And, me and my wife sat in the director's chair. He's like, "These are my friends." And the director's like, "Okay, whatever." And, so yeah, it was the connections I made because of Dutch.
Sure.
shot my movie career without even doing Tishomingo Blues.
Yeah.
Shot it out because there's a trade paper called the Stunt Contact, and it was in there. So somehow it got in there, and I was the technical advisor and stuff like that. So naturally, all these big wig stunt people wanted to be a part of Don Cheadle and Matthew McConaughey and stuff. So they're calling me, going, "Well, I can maybe use you on my show. If you use me, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Look, dude. I mean, I don't know. I'm a peon, but." Yeah, it propelled me to levels that I never expected, and all because of my friendship with Dutch.
That's wonderful. So at this point, you've done 200 movies,
Well,
something like that.
174.
When you transitioned from diving to stunts, was there anything that makes you a good diver that made it harder for you to be a good stunt man or a stunt coordinator?
Patience, hurry up and wait. I climb up the diving ladder and I go when I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
The announcer would say, bronze medalist 1994 contest, Danny Cosmo. And then if I want to go now, if I want to take my time, if the wind's blowing too much or whatever, I go when I'm ready. In the movie business is totally different. You got to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I'm ready. Well, no, we're not going to get to you until 6 o'clock in the evening.
Right.
So the hurry up and wait and stuff. But I specialized in high falls. I specialized in lighting myself on fire and stuff. So the transition from high diver to stunts was a little bit easier for me because I had that air sense from my diving career and from my springboard diving and being a little kid and stuff like that. And so it wasn't as hard to transition into the stunts. I found it was a little bit easier because I got to wear pads. I got to
Okay.
jump onto a pad. I wasn't in a Speedo, and if I landed wrong, I got water, an enema at 60 miles an hour. It was, yeah. So I found the stunt business, and I don't want to disrespect the stunt business at all, but I found it a little bit easier than high diving,
Sure.
which made my life better because it was like, okay, well, this is a piece of cake compared to what I did. I used to run out on the board and just dive out on the board and grab it with one arm and
Yeah.
hang on the board with one arm. I mean, I got the injuries to prove it, but I was the comedian. So I
Yeah.
did stuff that you don't do on a diving board. And so being in the stunt business was okay, well, we want you to fly over this couch and land. I'm like, okay, no problem. Oh, but we're gonna put a pad down for you. Oh, gee, you need me to do it 50 times? No problem, So and that, the repetition, having to do it over and over and over. Where high diving, if I make one mistake, I'm whacked and I'm hurt. Where in the stunt business, I had to make sure I knew exactly what I was doing and to be able to do it exactly the same way.
Hmm.
10, 15 times if need be. Dutch wanted Vigo Mortensen
Hmm.
in the beginning. In the very beginning, he wanted Vigo, but Vigo was doing, and I in the same height as Vigo, and I got the same nose as
Hmm.
him, and I didn't really know who he was, but he was so tied up in that
Oh,
trilogy,
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, and that he was out. He told Dutch, I was out, but Dutch really wanted him and really liked him. And I was like, oh, this is a guy that I can double. Because it was funny, because once I was training Matthew, Dutch says, oh, yeah, you can double Matthew, no problem. So when we stood next to each other, Matthew had just come off of Sahara with Penelope Cruz. He had an 8-pack. I've never seen anybody with an 8-pack other than bodybuilders. And he was just ripped solid. And I'm standing next to him, and my wife goes, you can't double him. And I go, how tall are you? And I said, you're 6 foot. And he goes, nope, I'm 5'11", 3/4. I go, that's 6 foot, He goes, nope, 5'11", 3/4. And so I took a picture and sent it to Dutch, and I said, there's no way, I can double him. And he goes, well, he don't look that big. And I go, yeah, well, he is, I said, now, no one will notice me doing a high dive from 80 feet. And what they wanted him to do was a 20-foot dive. They just wanted Matthew to do a 20-foot dive, a branny, half twist, go feet first. And then they could, whoever did the dive, whether it was me or whatever, they could take him from the top and then
Yeah.
edit it in, him doing the entry and coming out the water. And
Right.
I was like, okay, that's easy enough. I can get him to do a 20-foot dive. We got him to 16 feet before they canceled the movie. But along the way, he was trying to do it in a speedo, and his double told me, he said, whatever you do, I mean, I said I got a wetsuit for him. And he goes, well, he's not going to want to wear the wetsuit. I said, I tell him, Matthew, you need to put a knee pad on because you're going to go down to your knee and you might have to do it 15 times. And Matthew would say, no, 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 I'm good. And after like 5 takes, Matthew would say, okay, I'm ready for the knee pad. So I knew he told me that ahead of time. So I brought the wetsuit. So the first day he started trying to learn that flip with the half twist, he was landing on his side because he couldn't picture it. And he came in the next day and he was all bruised. Judd, he was bruised like somebody hit him with a baseball bat.
Oh wow.
He comes in and he looks at me and he goes, yeah, my girlfriend, which was Penelope Cruz at the time, my girlfriend, he would never say the name. He'd say, my girlfriend asked me, what the hell is Danny Cosmo doing to you? And he says, I'll wear the wetsuit now. And I was like, yeah, well, you're double. Norby said that you were going to do this. So we had
Yeah.
a laugh. The first day, he showed up with a case of Miller Lite.
All
For the
right.
first day, walks up, and I'm thinking, oh, what do I go? Yeah, that's cool. Or no, I'm a professional. I don't drink or anything like that, and stuff. So that was kind of cool about that. And of course, I was crushed when they canceled Tishomingo Blues. And then
Yeah.
as I'm now, 20 years later, and understand the movie business and understand production and all that, I understood. But my thing was, I told Dutch, I said, if the movie never gets made, we will always have that special bond from talking about my profession and high diving and Tishomingo Blues, and your friendship is second to none.
Yeah.
So
Well, Cosmo, thank you so much for taking so much of your time. This has been amazing. It is always great to talk to the people who helped Elmore along the way.
yeah, I
And
listened to your podcast with Otto
oh,
just
great.
last night. Yeah, I listened to it because I wanted to get a feel, for you. In fact, I looked you up. You had something to do with Freaky Deaky,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
worked.
and I looked that up, and that was funny because 2 actors in Freaky Deaky I worked with
Oh, yeah. Who?
on Philly Kid, the movie Philly Kid, which was directed by Jason Connery. Michael had a short
Oh, Michael
little
J. White.
cameo. Michael J. White,
Great.
and he had that. And then I doubled Crispin Glover in a movie called The Bag Man with John Cusack
Oh, wow.
and Robert De Niro. I didn't get credit for doubling him because we were on the set and they were going to hit him in the back of the head with a rubber shovel. And Crispin says, I don't want to do that. And they were like, well, who are we going to get? And I was there because I was a dead guy in the back of John Cusack's car for a lot of the movies. I couldn't blink. I was just dead. I was already killed, and I was
All
in the
right.
back seat. He took me out the back seat, put me in the trunk, took me out the trunk, put me in the back seat. I was just a dead guy, and the director goes, "You're such a good dead guy," and I was like, "Yeah, well, that's what I've been told." But because you don't blink, I've never seen an actor not blink like you. So, but yeah, I looked you up and I saw that, and I was like, wow, Crispin was great. I only got to meet him a little bit, and he was
Yeah.
gone to his trailer. But yeah, and Michael, I kind of coordinated Michael a little bit, and he goes, "You don't know who I am, huh?" And I go, "No, sir, I don't." He goes, "Well, I'm a martial artist, and I know how to throw a punch." And I go, "Enough said." I
Yeah.
walk back to Jason. I go, "He's good."
Yeah.
I was just going to say, okay, this is an actor, so you can't hit him hard.
Right.
I had
Yeah.
no clue who he was, but he had a little
Yeah.
cameo. It wasn't much, but when I saw that in Freaky Deaky, I never saw the movie. In fact, we were in California at the time doing something, do the Tonight Show or something, and I
Uh,
called the line producer of Tishomingo Blues, and
yeah.
he goes, "Oh, we're doing Be Cool right now. Why don't you come to the set?" So me and my wife went to the set. He introduced us to The Rock. We both looked up. He had that big afro on, that wig.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know who he was until he walked up to me, and I was like, and of course, Steven said, "This is the diver in one of Elmore's books, Dennis." And Rock was like, "Oh, nice to meet you, Dwayne. Dwayne Johnson, nice to meet you." And I met all those guys that were sitting around the table at the
Yeah.
time. and they went through the 10 takes or whatever, and was sitting in the chairs. We had the headphones on, listening to it. It was just so cool. I was treated like an A-list star, and here I am. Just to me, I was just a peon, and
Well,
just a belly flopper that got to do a lot of cool things because of Dutch.
well, not just a belly flopper, a world record holding belly flopper.
Well, yeah,
So,
they since broke the record, and it's a lot higher now. And he did it for a lot less than me. And he was a friend of mine. He could have called me because Guinness kept saying, "We need to find somebody else to do it because you can go up 1 inch, he can go up 1 inch, and we can make it wrestling, like y'all hate each other and all that, and it would be good." America didn't like it, but Europe ate it up. Europe loves Guinness World Records. Guinness here didn't do too well on a TV show. I think it went like maybe 2 seasons.
huh.
People can get online and watch all the stupid stuff they want instead of Guinness World Records. But, it was cool, that, I was able to do that record, and Dutch was really just fascinated with it. What made you want to do that? And that and that. But, it was one of those things, like I told you before. I got air sense. If I can see it in my mind, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So my first year high diving, 1987, really high diving real quick. I only knew one dive, that dive I did at the World's Fair, the Flying Gainer. And so I was up at Santa Claus, Indiana, at this park called Holiday World, and I learned 15 different high dives
Oh, wow.
there because I saw people do it. And if I can see it in my mind, I can do it. Because I
Yeah.
wasn't a spotter. Like I said, I didn't spot, but I felt it. And I learned, and I ended up having over 80 different high dives at the end of my career.
Wow.
What a great career it was. Brought me to all over the world. I spent 3 years in Hong Kong, learned Chinese, and all. So it helped me in the future with my mother-in-law.
There you go. That's all you need. Then,
Judd, thank you so much. I mean, I wish I could have said hello to Alex. I did look him up. I see
Oh,
that
yeah.
he's in a rock and roll band. He plays drums. I did my little research too.
Yeah.
But
He's
make sure you give him
actually,
my best.
I will.
And Judd, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been a pleasure. It's been exciting. You can see my emotions.
The Elmore Leonard podcast is produced and edited by Judd Rubin. Music by Greg Ahee. Hosted by Judd Rubin and Alex Leonard. Executive produced by Peter Leonard. Copyright 2025, Elmore Leonard Inc. Please visit us at elmoreleonardofficial.com or send us an email at hello@theelmoreleonardpodcast.com.